It was an especially cold December morning when Stuart got into his car's icy cabin. After starting the engine, he warmed it up a little and drove cautiously onto the nearly empty road. Stuart was on his way to a neighbouring town to make a deal with a new supplier of auto parts for his store. Recently, he had been unlucky with suppliers, so he hoped that this time the negotiations would go well. Thankfully, Stuart was right this time. He was able to agree on shipments that were supposed to start from the new year. After shaking hands with his new partner, he went outside. Delighted with the successful deal, Stuart decided to stop by a store and buy a gift for his wife, Emily. He pulled up near a shopping centre, walked among the many stores, and chose a beautiful watch for Emily with a gold-plated case from an expensive boutique. By the time Stuart left the city, it was already dark and heavy snow had started to fall. Visibility on the road was rapidly deteriorating, and even with the headlights on and the windshield wipers working, it was almost impossible to see anything in the distance. When Stuart drove onto an intersection, he only had time to notice something dark on the left with his peripheral vision. He started to brake, but it was already too late. A heavy logging truck that had jumped onto the highway easily knocked Stuart's car off the road, crushing the driver's side with its huge bumper. "Hey, how are you there? Are you alive?" Stuart struggled to open his eyes and saw through the broken glass the face of an unfamiliar man. The man immediately got busy, tried to open the door, but it didn't budge. Then he ran for a pry bar and, with difficulty, but broke the battered door and, picking Stuart up by the arms, dragged him outside. Stuart gathered his strength, turned his head, looked at his feet, and was horrified that his feet were completely crushed and left bloody tracks in the snow. His last strength left him, and Stuart lost consciousness. He woke up in the hospital. The first thing he did was try to move his toes, and realizing they were gone, moaned in pain and despair. A grey-haired doctor came into the ward, carefully examined his bandaged limbs, and seeing the patient's suffering on his face, said, "Well, calm down, please. It's not as bad as it could have been. You lost a lot of blood, and it's just a miracle that you survived." Emily arrived in the evening, tears in her eyes, as she sat down next to him and took his hand in hers. Stuart looked at her and remembered buying her a watch at the store, and groaned at his own foolishness. "I stopped by the store to buy you a watch. Why couldn't I have just stayed home?" he muttered. "Stuart, everything will be good. Don't worry." His wife tried to reassure him, holding his hand tighter. "What's so good about this? Who needs me now?" Stuart said irritably. "Tell Graham to manage the store himself from now on," he added, turning to the wall. After being discharged, Emily suggested that Stuart live in his late grandfather's old house outside the city, surrounded by nature. Stuart agreed, seeing it as a good idea. Emily packed her husband's things in a suitcase and one more time offered to hire a caregiver for Stuart, but he angrily refused. He got out of bed to show her that he could take care of himself, but a sharp pain in his lower back forced him back onto the bed. Gritting his teeth to keep from screaming in pain, he made another attempt and moved to his wheelchair, showing his wife that he didn't need anyone's help. With a proud look, he left the room. Everything in his grandfather's house was as simple as ever, but beautiful in its own way. Stuart gazed at his grandfather's portrait and suddenly remembered what he was like when he was alive. Although it had been 5 years since his passing, Stuart still vividly remembered his grandpa. He remembered his face, overgrown with stiff bristles, and his old crumpled work shirt, stained with gasoline and tobacco. He wore it all the time, taking it off only for washing. Grandfather died 5 years ago, but Stuart still missed him. These memories took him back to the distant past. He remembered the times when his mother was still alive, before she was diagnosed with cancer. Every morning she used to make him pancakes and carrot fritters, which he loved. It all felt so close now that Stuart completely withdrew into himself and sat in his wheelchair, hypnotized. "Stuart, are you even listening to me?" Emily called out to him. "I might be leaving soon. Don't miss me too much, I'll be back. And call me if you need anything." "Okay," Stuart nodded. "Don't forget about me while you're gone," he joked, but his wife flinched at his words. "How can you say that?" Emily said, offended. Then she kissed her husband goodbye and left quietly. Stuart watched as the heavy door closed behind his wife, and at that moment it seemed to him that he had lost her for the last time. He instinctively jerked forward, but a sharp pain pierced his back, and he, groaning, wearily sank into his wheelchair. A month passed. At first Emily called Stuart almost every day, inquiring about his health, offering help, but then her calls became less frequent, and finally stopped altogether. Stuart, in a troubled foreboding, tried to reach Emily himself, but her phone did not answer. Stuart guessed that Emily had left him and decided to live her own life, so he soon gave up his attempts to contact her. Deep down he understood his wife, because not everyone can find the strength to take on such a heavy burden as him, but resentment firmly settled in his heart and did not give him peace, neither day nor night. One evening, lost in troubled thoughts, Stuart suddenly heard the gate creak outside. He looked out the window, but it was already quite dark outside, and he didn't see anyone. Thinking that he had imagined it, he was about to immerse himself in his thoughts again, but then he clearly heard a knock on the door. "It's open, come in," Stuart called out, wondering who could come to visit him at this time. The door opened, and to his surprise, Stuart saw his neighbour, Penelope, standing on the threshold. She was petite, slender and modestly dressed. He looked her up and down and gestured for her to sit at the table. The girl walked timidly into the room and sat down opposite. "Hi, Stuart," she said. "I was passing by and saw the lights in the window, so I decided to stop by. How long have you been here?" "It's been a month. I just haven't left the house," Stuart said gloomily as he rolled out from behind the table, demonstrating his wheelchair. "What happened to you?" Penelope exclaimed concernedly. Stuart wearily waved his hand and told Penelope the story. He had barely finished when they heard a noise from outside, and then someone, drunk, started calling out for Penelope rudely. "Is that your stepfather?" Stuart asked. The girl sadly nodded and explained that her stepfather had been drinking heavily for a long time, almost lost his mind, and life with him at home had become unbearable for her. Penelope could have gone to the city to study, but without money it was impossible, and there was nowhere to earn money in the village. Shivering from the cold, Penelope approached the stove to warm her hands and turned to Stuart. "Can I stay with you tonight? I'm scared to go back home. He'll definitely beat me." Stuart nodded and suggested that Penelope choose any place she felt comfortable. While wincing in pain, he approached the stove and removed a pot of potatoes from the burner. Seeing Stuart's anguish, Penelope took the pot from him and helped set the table. "You need to see Mr. Gazzard," she advised. "People come from all over the region to see him. He'll fix your back right away." "That sorcerer," Stuart laughed, recalling old Mr. Gazzard living in the forest. "He's a healer," Penelope corrected him sternly. "Last summer I dislocated my leg, and he fixed it so well that there wasn't even a trace left." Stuart waved his hand, promising to visit Mr. Gazzard somehow, and suggested Penelope distract herself from the conversation and finally have dinner. A month passed. Penelope visited Stuart every day, helped with the household chores, chatted with him over a cup of tea, and once brought Mr. Gazzard to his place. He immediately examined Stuart, running his fingers over his spine and pressing on one of the vertebrae so hard that Stuart almost passed out. Mr. Gazzard told him to endure a little and repeated his manipulations several more times. "Done," he said, patting Stuart gently on the back. "It won't hurt you any more." Stuart smiled incredulously, but within a few hours he realized that he really felt better. Within a couple of days he could easily turn his torso, bend and straighten his back, and even while sitting in his wheelchair, he could do housework. He went out to the garden for the first time and put the plot in order, and didn't even feel tired. Returning to the house, he realized for the first time in months that there were pleasant moments in life. But before he could enjoy this new feeling, he was startled by the unexpected sound of the phone ringing. It was Martha, Emily's sister. She struggled to find the right words for a while, but eventually she gathered the courage to tell Stuart that Emily had decided to file for divorce. Stuart was stunned and didn't know what to say. It seemed to him that the remnants of his world had collapsed into an abyss, taking his hope with it. "Why?" he managed to say after a long silence. "They're planning to get married," Martha said, embarrassed. Stuart felt like he couldn't breathe. He asked Martha to call back, and after turning off his phone, threw it into the corner of the room. Slowly, he walked to his grandfather's old chest of drawers, opened the top drawer, and took out an antique straight razor with a beautiful bone handle. Stuart ran his finger along the blade to make sure it was still as sharp as it was years ago and started to think. He imagined himself making just one thin cut and finally getting rid of the pain in his heart. Bitter thoughts, loneliness at night, and endless suffering. Someone knocked on the gate, and fast footsteps approached. Penelope appeared on the threshold with a large bundle in her hands. "Are you out of your mind, Stuart?" she shouted. "Don't even think about it!" she cried, rushing towards him and snatching the razor from his hand. "Why? Why did you want to do that? Everything was so good!" "Are you kidding at me? You all say that, but in reality you pity me. What good is it to be without feet and not be able to live my life to the fullest?" he shouted and hit his stumps with all his might. Penelope froze in horror and helplessness, not knowing how to react. Then she suddenly came to her senses and unfolded the bundle she had brought with her. 2 prostheses and crutches fell out onto the floor. "This is what Aunt Helen asked you to deliver," stuttered Penelope, and kneeling down, she attached the prostheses to Stuart's legs. "These are left from her late husband." Penelope helped Stuart to stand up, handed him the crutches, and he, unsteadily moving on his artificial legs, took a few steps. "Well done! See how great it is!" Penelope rejoiced, tenderly observing every movement of Stuart. Stuart walked around the room, took a breather, and approached the girl. "Thank you. It's really not bad at all." He smiled and held Penelope close to him. The girl immediately hugged Stuart by the neck and kissed him. Regaining her senses, she recoiled in fear, but Stuart managed to grab her by the waist, pulled her close, and running his hand through her lush hair, brought the girl's face so close that their lips met again in a hot kiss. That night they spent together, for the first time, as a couple. A week later, Stuart went to the city to divorce his wife and check on the business of the store. The divorce procedure went quickly, and Stuart, dryly saying goodbye to his ex-wife, quickly left the registry office. Emily tried to stop Stuart to ask for forgiveness, but he did not even look at her and walked past, tightly squeezing the crutches. Stuart called a taxi and went to the store. Entering inside, he looked around confusedly. The store was empty. There were some crumpled boxes and old unsold parts lying on the dusty showcases. Stuart approached Graham, bent over the cash register, and hit the floor with a crutch with force. Graham looked up and recoiled in horror. "Stuart, if you're about Emily, then she—" He started speaking nervously. "I'm not interested in those details," Stuart interrupted him. "I came about the store. I see things are not going well." Graham collected all the bills and small coins in the cash register, put them in a bag, and handed them to Stuart. "We need to sell the store," he said. "There are no buyers, no profits, only expenses." "It's not up to you to decide. This is my store, and I will decide what to do with it. And believe me, I can handle this problem," Stuart sharply replied, and left the store without saying goodbye. Stuart was sorry for his business. He had put great effort into this store, but there was nowhere to take the money for investing in it. The only solution could be a loan from the bank, but he doubted that he would be approved. At home he shared his doubts with Penelope, and the girl suddenly, as if remembering something, looked at him with wide-open eyes, and then, asking him to wait a little, ran out onto the street towards her house. She returned in a few minutes and handed Stuart a large black key, clearly of antique workmanship, decorated with intricate carving. "Your grandfather asked me shortly before his death to keep this key and give it to you. I often came to see him, and he always talked about you. He also asked to pass on this key is from the chest that is hidden in the basement. I don't even know what could be there." "Well, okay, we'll see tomorrow," Stuart smiled. On the next morning, Stuart took out a flashlight, handed it to Penelope, and ordered her to follow him. In the kitchen, he lifted the heavy lid of the pantry, carefully descended, and as soon as he reached the ground, he shouted to Penelope to also come down. When they turned on the flashlight, the darkness dissipated, and in the corner they saw traces of brickwork. After dismantling the bricks, they pulled out a small iron chest. The key turned with a creak in the hole. A click sounded, and Penelope gingerly lifted the lid off the chest. Inside was a small bag on a string. Stuart took it, untied it, and poured the contents into his palm. Penelope brought the flashlight closer and froze in amazement. On Stuart's palm, the sharp edges of real precious stones glistened and sparkled with different colours. Penelope and Stuart stood, admiring the incredible and mesmerising sight, unable to look away, and everything that was happening seemed like a fairy tale dream to them. Having come to his senses, Stuart chose the biggest ruby from the pile of stones and gave it to Penelope. The girl accepted the gift and began to admire it. "You know, I remembered. My grandfather once told me about his youth. He worked in the mines, but I never thought that he hid his findings and kept them for so many years." Stuart took a final look at the exquisite treasure, neatly folded the stones back into the bag, and smiled contentedly. He felt confident again and hoped that everything would be fine for them now, as he could use the inheritance to get the store out of debt, improve the business, and buy himself the most modern prothesis. "Will you marry me?" he suddenly asked Penelope. "We will sell the stones, leave here, and start a new happy life. Do you agree?" "Of course, my love. If you only knew how long I've been waiting for this," she whispered, and hugging Stuart around the neck, buried her face in his chest. Stuart hugged the girl tightly and realized that all the pain and heaviness of the past few months after the accident was finally leaving. Love helped him forget about despair, betrayal, and disappointment, filling his soul with the long-forgotten feeling of incredible, all-consuming happiness.